Hello and welcome to the Broken Road Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Peterson. Today I have Dexter Cearley joining me. He is a host and creator of the Panhandle Primate Podcast. Wanted to get him on today and discuss something new. If you have any questions about who I am or what I'm about, you can go back, look at past episodes. We were interviewing my wife, Amber, to kind of catch up everybody on some details that I've forgotten since I had a stroke. So anyhow, that kind of catches us up to where we're at. How you doing today, Mr. Cearley?
Doing great, living the dream.
Yeah.
Living the dream. Just a little quick intro. I would say I'm the host of probably a failed podcast. I've had the podcast going for a lot of years, and it was an interview-based podcast. And then I've also been a firefighter paramedic a firefighter intermediate medic for 12 years, and then a firefighter paramedic for like the last 4.
Okay.
So like together, I guess it was 16 years in the emergency medical / fire world.
Awesome.
So
Just to be clear, you're not a doctor, right?
no, I'm not a doctor. Far from a doctor. I mean, I can do a lot of things that doctors can do, but I would not classify myself as a doctor.
So we'll just use that as a disclaimer today.
Disclaimer.
Neither one of us are doctors.
Yeah.
But we're gonna discuss blood pressure, the effects on the body, specifically high blood pressure, and the ways. Hopefully, we can discuss the ways to get that down, what it actually does to the body. Unless there's, what else would you like to talk about that?
Oh, I know. It's so
see
hard whenever you said, like you sent me the text last night was just like high blood pressure. And I was like,
What is that?
well, I'm trying to get in my head, okay, how do we actually talk about high blood pressure? Because there's a whole bunch of different problems with it and types of it and causes for it too.
Okay. That's exactly why I wanted to have you on.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of it, it's funny because whenever I'm with a patient or on a call, there's a lot of times where they'll ask me a question, and they're like look at me and they're like, well, what would you do? Like, what would you advise me to do here? And I always have to do the disclaimer. I'm so used to doing the disclaimer of, no, I'm not a doctor. Like, I'm not a doctor. I can't look inside your body. I can evaluate your blood pressure, tell you what your blood pressure is, but I have no idea what is high for you, you know? So like my dad, for instance, he had an instance where he just went in for his normal checkup and they took his blood pressure and they're like, wow, you have high blood pressure. Well, he never had registered any of the signs or symptoms or even thought that he had high blood pressure, So it's kind of one of those things, like imagine, I think back to whenever I was in high school.
Right.
And I'd hit this 2:00 wall every single day where I was just, all I want to do is nap right now. My brain is shutting down. I'm done with this thing. But I just registered that as, no, that's just how I feel at 2:00 every day.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people do that just with their general health. They're just like, no, my lower back just hurts all the time.
Right.
Or if I sit at my desk for 8 hours, I have a really bad headache. But that's just from staring at the screen or something. You find ways of almost integrating the symptoms into just like, that's how my day is all the time. So there's a lot of people who are walking around with really high blood pressure. Like, one of the signs for like really high blood pressure is like you'll have a ringing in your ears. Mm-hmm. And there's some people who just think they have ringing in their ears.
Well, I have tinnitus, so.
Well,
there's
or
no doubt.
you've shot a lot of guns or operated a lot of heavy machinery, and your ears just ring. Mm-hmm. So you're gonna ignore one of the signs and symptoms that you have high blood pressure because you're so used to just having that symptom all the time anyway.
Right.
So you got a lot of. And the biggest there's a lot of different problems with like high blood pressure. But one of the biggest problems is that like you got to think of like all of your arteries and everything as pipes. Mm-hmm. And the pipes are able to expand and contract. And there are certain times where you want them to expand. And there's certain times when you want them to contract based off of what you're doing and based off of your heart rate, right? So like if your heart rate starts to increase, you want your blood vessels to tighten up a little bit. That way that blood pressure gets the blood to where it's going faster, you know? Anyway, you have, it's like the sympathetic and the parasympathetic response system. Have you looked into
I
that
haven't
yet?
but
That's like, they call it like the fight or flight and the sleep, and I can't remember what. Anyway, like if you think about it, when you're sleeping, you're in one systemic response. If you're in like a fight or flight, like where you're just like adrenaline jump,
your body's stressing at that point.
well, you're getting as ready as you can get. So if you think about it, like the nerves you get right before you're about to perform,
Right.
you know, you've prepared all this stuff for it. You get that dump. A lot of people have to try to learn how to fight that dump, because if you're an athlete, that's a dangerous dump, because it's going to make you jittery and jumpy and, you know, overexcited. Anyway, all that to go back for blood pressure. I think as we would be talking in this context, if your pipes, if you don't exercise that, you lose it. It's just like anything. And I know you've talked a lot about it with therapy and with having had a stroke.
Right.
And one of the things they teach you in therapy is like, you cannot neglect that limb.
Right.
You have to use that limb,
Correct.
even if it hurts. Like that's all what physical therapy is. It's like, oh, I don't want to move my hand because it hurts. Well, it's like, well, if you don't move your hand, you don't get your hand back.
So the same thing as exercise in the way that affects your blood pressure, and the reason why that's important.
Well, exercise causes, it's the same thing. The other thing when you text me that is, you know, the all the cold plunge hype. To my understanding, now granted, I've never even gone to college, so you know it's not like I can be saying, like, not only am I not a doctor, but I'm like as far from a doctor as you could possibly be from a doctor, you know. So take that what you will, but how I understand it is that you're exercising your vascular system. So the same way that if you go to lift weights, what you're doing is you're trying to make your muscles do as much as they can do.
Right.
Right? To tax them so that they'll build bigger or build stronger. You're doing the same thing with like your blood, your vascular system. You're trying to get it to, so when you first get in, everything contracts, right? Because it's like, oh damn, it's cold. Put all the blood into the center of the body to keep all the vital organs operating. So everything constricts on the outside, and it tries to keep your core warm. But then you hit a point, or I think the goal is to hit a point when your body goes the opposite direction and says, oh, nope, now we actually gotta warm all of our limbs up. We got to get ready for battle, right? I want blood, fresh blood in every part of my body if I'm getting ready for battle.
Which kind of makes sense why an athlete would run at such a lower heart rate than somebody that's not as healthy. Because they've exercised that part of their body enough that it really doesn't have to work near as hard to put the blood through the limbs. Maybe I'm off track. But
I
feel
think
that's
what
we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I think so. One of the biggest shifts in my mindset from being like a young athlete to like a little bit of an older athlete was through the endurance community. So all these guys that are girls, and guys that are all doing these long, like 200-mile runs and all these different crazy. Well, they started doing like research on all these distance athletes. And so you've got like marathon runners who are running at like 4.5 minute pace.
Oh, wow.
I mean, incredibly fast. I mean, faster than that. I can't remember I think how to pronounce his name. It's like Chipchanga or something like that. He's this Kenyan that runs the marathon, and I mean he's running sub 4 minute miles.
Wow.
For every single mile.
And can we ask what you run a mile in?
So
because to me it's impressive. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'd like
so if I go out to run a 6 mile run, I'm probably in the like 8:20 to 8.5 minute range.
Okay.
You know? So just to put that in perspective,
right?
Like I don't think I could run I know for a fact that I probably couldn't keep up with him for a quarter of a mile at that pace, you know? I mean, it's just incredible when you compare it. But one of the things that community and that the endurance community, what they say is that most people do their fast runs too slow and their slow runs too fast.
Okay.
So in order to like increase your like VO2 max, like if you're wanting to increase that number, you don't go above that number. You do like longer activities below that number, which is counterintuitive to our American mind, because we're thinking like, if I'm going to get better, I have to be pushing the limit. This is actually like, no, you stay behind the limit. And it elevates that, because they say like if you're running or doing like a long distance activity, like 80% of your time, you should be able to have a conversation with the person next to you.
Right.
And you see that too. Like a lot of these, we don't have a whole lot of road bikers around here. Like the community's not, I don't think it would be safe
Probably
for
a
there
little
to
bit
be.
dangerous
Yeah,
here,
it'd be very dangerous.
There was actually a lady that got hit right here.
I was gonna say it's actually really dangerous everywhere. Like Amarillo is a pretty good area for road biking. Like you have a lot of desolate roads with a lot of space, but people get hit there all the time. But all I was gonna say is typically when you see them riding in a group, everybody will be having conversations.
Right.
You get up to the front, you pull for a minute, you get to the back, you have a conversation while you're working your way up back through the group, and then you fall off. And that's actually the way that you build up overall cardiovascular health is like, because then as you bump this number up, then your resting comes lower. So you bump your top number up, but also your resting number comes lower.
So for me, we're going to have a lot of people watching this podcast, I hope, that have been through some kind of trauma, or they've had to go through some therapy. And I'm trying to give them some information on ways that they can kind of improve their situation to their ability. So I think that what we're talking about still works in overall, but we are talking about people at the peak of their game. So if we were talking and going to take exactly what we're talking about on their VO2, explain kind of what that is for them. And then, let's say it's hard for me just to come up for an instance, but somebody that has been bedridden for a while, but they're able to get up and they're wanting to get moving again and trying to work up to that spot. What are the, how can you even, it's a very tough thing to level up from that point.
So I think it's the same mindset. So it would just be, number one, treat it like a marathon, not a sprint. So which I've heard you say multiple times recently, man, I think I overdid it today.
Oh, yes.
Man, I think I overdid it today. I tell guys this because a lot of the firemen that I work with, I say a lot of them, occasionally a fireman that I work with will come up to me for like, and it's actually kind of ironic because I'm not very good at fitness. Like I do like a very few thing. Like I'm going to
disagree with
well,
that
but
statement.
I do like a few particular things, right? But relatively, I'm not a standout in any one thing. But my most important rule, and this I think should be each person's most important rule, is that at any point in time you're ready to perform. So you don't ever want to put, now granted, I'm sure a lot of like fitness guys, like genuine fitness guys, like elite athletes would disagree with me. But my thing is like, for me, if I'm working out up at the station, at any point in time, we could get a call for a fire. And at that point in time, I need to be able to operate at my peak potential. Now, at the same time, I also want to work out at work to get better, to get stronger. But I also have to know that I always have to leave my performance potential on the table so that I can pull, so that I can get into that.
It's the same thing for me this morning, where it was really nice weather this morning. I'd like to go on my walk and get that knocked out, which I've been doing daily. But I saved that because I knew that, even though it's only 2 miles that I'm pushing for right now, it's a lot for my body still in recovery. And I probably wouldn't be able to sit here and visit with you afterwards because I would be blasted.
And I think that's the other thing too, is you can't compare yourself to somebody else or to where somebody else is. Because, for instance, I could get caught up in that. And if I work, like you asked me my numbers earlier, those are not good numbers for a runner.
Right.
Now, it's good numbers for the average person or for like the general people that don't run. But like I had a cousin who just blew out his knee or like, tore his ACL or whatever. And he will be running faster than me in 10 months, right? I mean, he blew out his knee and he'll be running faster than me, So it's all in who you compare yourself to. If I compare myself to the good runners that I know, then I shouldn't even be running. I'm never going to be good at it.
Which you had you did a podcast called Metrics, I think actually kind of touched on a little bit of that and what are we judging that by, So for me, I'm probably my worst critic, my hardest critic right now. And I don't know that I was really necessarily in great shape before the stroke, but I am definitely far from the shape that I was in when that happened. So for me, getting up and down stairs, being able to walk 2 miles, that's a victory for me. I mean, I'm so happy to be doing that, but at the same time, it's a little bit frustrating knowing that I could jog that 2 miles before, no problem with weight on my back, and ruck it, and be able to do that at elevation too, in hikes and things like that. But yeah, I think it's like, if you get wrapped up in comparing yourself to somebody else or worried about what they're capable of doing compared to what you're capable of doing, you're probably really setting yourself up for failure.
I think like to me, you hit on the point right there, or maybe like slightly around the point of the goal is just to put your best forward, and I think the hard thing is like what you're saying is, well, I'm used to my best being like this benchmark. And now my best is this benchmark,
right?
But really, it's the effort that's going to cause the progression. So like it's funny because and I've seen this multiple times. Well, there will be a person that's like way fatter than me, and like way out of shape and eats terrible and has terrible habits and whatever, and they get on a kick, and they're walking, and they start losing weight. And they start getting motivated and they start feeling a little bit better. And then they get over that initial being sore every single day. And then they start like kind of like enjoying that feeling of being sore every single day. And all the while the weight's falling off. Mm-hmm. All the while they're going to bed a little bit earlier. They're drinking a little bit more water. They're eating a little bit better, right? They're like building all of this momentum and they're getting like rewarded for their discipline. And so they keep going. And now you've got a person that was way fatter than me and in terrible shape. And within however long, a year and a half, 2 years, now they're like the fitness person.
Right.
They know the knowledge because they had to learn about how to eat. They had to learn about actually how to exercise. They had to
it the hard way.
They had to earn all of these things. Now they have that knowledge. They have all of that repetition and all of the discipline that comes with it. Now let's say they couldn't run a 15-minute mile. Well, by the time they lost their first 50 pounds, they could run a 10-minute mile. Right. Then they lost their second 50 pounds. Before long, they're running at like a 7:20 pace and they're leaving me in the dust. I'm gone. Like they're beating me. Right. But they were able to build all that momentum because through the discipline, through learning how to do it. And so that's what it's one of those things that I feel like a lot of you want to get information on diabetes by somebody who has dealt with diabetes. Mm-hmm. If you want to, I am not the guy to come to talk to about getting back into shape.
Right.
Because I've just been very lucky. And honestly, it's like mediocrity for me. I've just maintained a level for like a really long time. I've never gotten really good. I've never been really fast, really strong, really crazy, whatever. But I've never like gotten out of shape either. I've just like maintained this. So people will come up to me and be like, "Hey, how do you get in shape?" I'm like, I don't really know.
You're a pretty dedicated person, though. I'm going to have to give that to you. I know for you, you're capable of more, so maybe that seems like mediocrity. Mm-hmm. To me, I watch you do a lot of things, a very physical person. And, maybe without trying as hard, you stay pretty healthy. You eat mm-hmm. healthy.
Oh, yeah. Well, that all goes to my wife. That all goes to Shannon.
Right.
Shannon, like what I lack in discipline, and believe me, it's a lot. Like that's probably like my number one character flaw, is like I'm like, if there's a beer on the table, I'm gonna drink the beer. You know, like I mean, it's just like never a wounded soldier or whatever. But Shannon's the one that's very disciplined. So she's the one that she read a Jillian Michaels book. Do you know who Jillian Michaels is? She was on The Biggest Loser. She was one of the coaches.
Okay.
And she's like a G. She was like a hippie fitness, no plastics, now she's like really vindicated in today's media landscape. And
she was ahead of her time.
She was way ahead of her time. But Shannon read one of her books really early on. And one of the things she said was, eat whatever you want to eat. Just make sure it's real food. So eat a chocolate cake. Just make a homemade chocolate cake.
Right.
Put real cocoa powder in it. Use real cream.
Not a Little Debbie's like little
don't eat something. Don't eat a Little Debbie. And so that's her big thing is just eat real food.
So I think for the audience to get us back on track a little bit.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I think it's
Bobbing
inspirational some of the things you're saying because I want people to understand that any time you're gonna get for you've been doing it for so long. You're not working that hard at it, but it's going to take work for anybody to go from a state of being immobile to being mobile again, and building up their mobility, stretching, working out, this podcast is about high blood pressure, but all these things we're talking about right now are things that are going to improve your health in general. And hopefully bring those numbers to a spot where they're supposed to be.
Oh, 100%. I was wanting to at some point mention to your audience specifically, or anybody who's tuning into this show specifically, my buddy Coben Puckett, because he's a perfect example. And you can get on his Instagram. I think it's just Coben with a K, Puckett. Invitational maybe. He hosts a bull riding event every year, but he. I know I've told you about him before, but just for the audience, he got, brutally injured in a bull riding accident, probably 15 years ago, and quadriplegic, told he was never going to do anything on his own again, and he's doing it. I mean, he's able to even mow on a zero turn. He's able to mow his yard,
but he had to put the work in.
Oh, dude, he has a gym in his house.
Yeah.
Like, he has as much room dedicated to living as he does working out. Mm-hmm. And it was like he is able to do a lot of things that people told him he was not going to be able to do. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I think is so important for anybody who's like ever injured or sick or whatever is a lot of it does end up coming down to like what you decide to do.
Absolutely.
It's just kind of like, hey, and now there are limitations. I cannot decide to be an NBA basketball player. Like there's a really good chance that Callahan will not be able to decide to be an NBA basketball player. He's just not,
That's not his build. Yeah,
not everybody has every option open to them. But I do think it's kind of one of those things like pursuing the life that you want to, and to go back to the blood pressure stuff, because I know I got way off of that. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you do generally affect. And now, even if you do have like the best blood pressure in the world, like there was a really popular mountain biker in Amarillo who was an absolute savage. I mean, great shape for years. Mm-hmm. High, like long distance endurance athlete that was fast for years. And he was an older gentleman and died of a heart attack on the trail, So it's kind of hard. Maybe it's like a moderation in anything type thing, but then again, there is a little bit of a roll of the dice, luck of the draw type thing,
Oh yeah, I think when it's your time for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't think we wrote the book, but that's my opinion.
100%.
We can talk about that a lot later. And I did read something that basically said that just because your blood clots in your body, which is what affected me and what ended up causing my stroke, don't necessarily change your blood pressure. There's not, from what I read, it doesn't necessarily say that just because I have great blood pressure that there's not something seriously wrong with me.
Oh yeah.
And I, probably ran about on the average 118 over 80 or less. Anytime I ever check my blood pressure, I check my blood pressure daily now because it's something that I think about. And I think most people that have had a cardiovascular event do think about that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very important to keep an eye on blood pressure for somebody that has had a stroke or a heart attack, any of those things, because getting in those danger zones after you've already been there, your body is not as strong as it was.
This is probably not so. To be clear, most of my experience with blood pressure is emergency medically related, right? So where the instances where I'm dealing with it, it's like, oh, Meemaw passed out and fell on the floor. Well, why did Meemaw pass out and fall on the floor? Well, let's take her blood pressure, see what her blood pressure. Oh, her blood pressure is 70 over 40.
Well, yeah.
She passed out because she's not getting blood to her head when she stands up. Mm-hmm. And now what is causing her blood pressure to be low? There's a lot of different things that can cause your blood pressure to be low, right. You know? And then the vice versa. Like, oh, man, I've got a splitting headache. I've had a splitting headache for 2 days, and I want to go to the emergency room, but I can't see straight. Like, I can't see straight, so I don't feel comfortable driving my car because I don't know if I'm going to be able to drive. Okay, well, we take their blood pressure. It's through the roof.
Right.
Well, why do you think their vision is jacked up? Because they've got more pressure in their head than is freaking jacking with their brain, you know, jack.
Like
that's how I always
picture. You're not
picture.
A doctor, so you're seeing those. You're wondering, okay, what's causing this? But your job is just to say, okay, here are the vitals. This is what's going on. You do know how to administer medicine if you have to on the fly, and things to help that person get their blood pressure down. But ultimately, when they get to the hospital, or if they end up being able to calm down, your referral would be go talk to your primary care physician, or let's get you to the hospital, which is typically what's probably going to happen in your case.
Yeah, typically, I mean, what's really gets difficult is when you go on somebody who has a history of high blood pressure, and they're on all these medications, and they're disciplined about their medications, and they're disciplined about their diet, and nothing's changed in 2 weeks, and now my blood pressure's skyrocketing. You know, I don't know. I have no idea, like, showing up on scene as to what's causing that. And then if they ask for my advice on it, I'm like, are you for sure you took your pill? 100%? I always take my pill. You're 100% sure that you always take your pill? Like, I don't know. I can't take that to the bank, you know? A lot of times it's very difficult, even whenever I'm, like, considering what medications I want to give the patient. And they're standing there and they're like, well, yeah, no, I mean, no, I'm pretty sure this is the one that I take normally. And I'm like, are you sure that that's the one you took? Like, you couldn't have not, maybe you missed your meds.
I have to be very methodical because
you got to be.
I have a problem. Like, if I don't do it a certain way every time and refill my prescriptions, you know, in my container there, in the same way every time, then I forget. You know, hey, did I take that?
Well, that's what I'm saying is
got a bunch of pills sitting out.
It's so difficult when you have a condition that you're managing, a chronic condition that you're managing with medications. That, now granted, I'm sure that there's a lot of people and that could explain it very well. I've listened to lectures of people that explain the body very well, but to me, it doesn't really seem like we understand what is happening with the body. Right. You can maybe use a little bit of an analogy, like it's like a car, right? You push the gas pedal, it opens up this valve, it makes it go harder here, it transfers this. You know, you can kind of use these different analogies, but in reality, it's just we live in a bag of chemicals that get moved around different places and cause vessels to open and close, orifices to open. You know, it's really a weird system. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, like with your arm, it got blocked off. There was no blood pressure getting to it, right? Something blocked the path to give it, you know, the blood. So what happens to it? It starts to get cold. It starts to get numb. Mm-hmm. It starts to... Like, the main point of blood pressure is to get fresh blood in. Well, why do you need fresh blood in? A portion of it is to bring, like, oxygen for the cell. Yep. But another portion of it is nothing is clean. So, for instance, if I turn on my car puts out exhaust out of the tailpipe. Well, the cell does the same thing. The cell is kicking out trash. So your blood brings in oxygen and it takes out trash. It brings in oxygen and takes out trash. Well, whenever the oxygen stops coming in, two things happen. One is it starts burning dirtier. So it's not burning as efficiently. The cell isn't. So it's putting out more trash, dirtier trash. But now there's also not the vehicle to take it away. So it's
kind of
piling
sitting
up.
in there and piling up.
Yeah, and so like
that's a good analogy.
And that's the danger. That's the danger. They call it compartment syndrome. Is whenever, like, if my leg gets pinched off for a while, my leg is going to produce a toxic material. And if I am not conscientious, which it's very acidotic, it becomes a very acidotic limb. And if I'm not cautious, whenever I let that constriction off,
you'll run that poison through your whole body, yeah.
But see, I can't handle it in that increment. It's like, like surge capacity, right? I can handle a little bit of trash, like my kidneys and my liver and everything. My body's built to handle a little bit of trash. I can handle a lot of trash if it's coming in correctly, right? So, like, for instance, like what rhabdo is. Have you ever heard of rhabdo?
No.
You've probably experienced it in your life, but it's where you overwork your muscles and basically you push them past the point. You push them into burning dirty, or and you're not drinking enough water, and then it ends up you have basically a really, really hard workout, and you produce more trash even though you are breathing and blood's getting there than you can deal with. So it's like a surge capacity thing. So like my kidneys, my liver, all these different things can process toxins out as long as they're coming in at a certain rate. If I dump all those toxins from my leg into my system, that can cause a really bad problem, And there's ways to combat it with different medications and stuff. But just all that to say, if you think about it, like, imagine you have really low blood pressure. Or not low blood pressure, but you have very poor circulation, right? So, like, that's when you see people that have swelling in their legs, and stuff like that. And then they end up not getting good circulation to their toes, and the same process as if I was to do a constriction happens, And I don't know, maybe, and I'm sure that the vascular system is, like, very well understood in a lot of different ways. But imagine if you were like 5 years old and they taught you how to exercise your vascular system. Like every morning. Like, let's say, I'm sure maybe I think the protocol for like a cold bath is 3 times a week or something. But imagine if you started doing that when you were 5 years old. And by the time you became 50, your vascular system was super robust.
Well, I think you touched on something there. I mean, Amber and I talked about that on the podcast that we already released, or maybe one I haven't released yet. But we did talk about the fact that we had to wait for a surgery from you because there's not that many vascular surgeons. So I think it's still kind of a cutting edge thing right now. I can't say that for a fact. I don't know. I'm not in that world. But I know that there's not a lot of people going to college for that and getting that level of education to be able to do that. So I think you're right on that it's still kind of a mystery, and they're still learning things about how that works properly.
You had rehab, right? But to a degree, you were also prehabbing, because you were probably in the best shape that you had been in years.
Yeah, they said that attributes to my ability to be able to kind of overcome some of the things that I've
and so that's what because
my body was already in a pretty good state.
That's one of the things I would say is, like, no matter what, every single person that's listening to this podcast will experience a medical emergency in their
Eventually.
life. At least one. You're gonna die. That's a lot of people consider that a medical emergency.
Yeah.
But more than likely, everybody's going to experience a medical emergency. Hopefully multiple medical emergencies, and you survive them,
Right.
But even if you break your leg or break your arm, I'm not saying you call an ambulance for everything. Please don't. But I mean, you break your leg, you break your arm, something's going to happen. Well, the the better you're taking care of yourself prior to having that thing, the quicker you're going to get over it. Like it's something ridiculous. I'd have to look up the statistic, but there's a statistic about the greatest predictor about like your longevity is your hip mobility or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's like an old person's ability to get up off of the floor themselves, mm-hmm. right?
Oh yeah.
The longer and the more efficiently you can get up off the floor yourself, the longer you are likely to live.
Yeah, motion's lotion, and then, I mean, it definitely, for sure.
But how often are, and now I don't know because I'm not an older person, right? But how often are they encouraged to crawl down and lay on the floor and then just stand back up off the floor?
Hardly any, but, through the process of my parents having to be there and watching me go through therapy, I think they realized how immobile they actually were and saw more of themselves in me because I was aged so quickly from the stroke. And basically, you know what I mean?
It's like a mirror.
Yeah. So, she's been doing, my mom's been doing chair yoga. So she's got a lot of movement, a lot of up and down. And they're getting close to their mid-70s. They're in great shape. My dad thought he was in good shape. He won't do the chair yoga, but I've started working with him and rehabbing with him. And he's feeling younger again, looking better, moving better, and said that the actual pains that he was having, before are kind of diminishing. And I was talking to a physical therapist that I'm working with now that's dry needling me here in Stephenville. And I asked him, I said, hey, what's this topic of which we kind of got off of it. We can go back to it in a minute, but this topic came from Jeremy over in Fort Worth. That was my physical therapist in Day Neuro. But I asked the physical therapist in Stephenville, I said, hey, what's something that is important to you? Like if you could tell somebody or you were on a podcast, what would you want to talk about? And he said that his was cervical, like spine pain and like this lumbar pain. And he said it's such a big deal. He said, and it's the imaging. He said once somebody gets an image and they know that they have this pain in their body or this degenerative disc problem, that all of a sudden they have these pains. And then they're addressing these pains instead of addressing them through physical therapy and exercise. They're addressing them through opiates.
And cortisol shots.
And all that. And really, I agree with them, and I have seen it through my dad, that when you start moving those body parts again, and if you don't know, you probably don't know. So that was part of it. I can't remember the study. I am going to do another podcast over that specifically, and he did print me off a sheet, but it showed that basically, I forget, 65% of 20-year-olds have a disc degeneration already at that point. And the study itself, I think the big point of it was that all these people that had these issues with their back, none of them were exhibiting pain. But across the board, from 20s up to 90s, they all had some kind of form, and not to say disc degeneration. It wasn't just that. Mm-hmm. It was, scoliosis and just all the different things that go on.
Well, we live in such a sedentary lifestyle. I like such a sedentary society, and everybody's always like crooked over looking at their phones, and I really do believe, and now granted, I think it's interesting because it's all hyper aware now, right? So it's interesting that you say your parents started seeing you and then they started looking at themselves, because you do, in a sense, you need to have some sort of a benchmark that you're measuring yourself off of, and also your expectations as to what you are going to be able to do or want to do. You need to be able to have those perspectives, something that gives you that perspective. Because I do feel, it was interesting to me, like as you were saying it, because I'm like, man, so often we look at our bodies and like, what, like osteoporosis is just your bones get weak.
Which happens from not moving as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say is they say that the way that you build stronger bones is by lifting weight.
Yes.
It's by weighting. It's literally just by weighting the bone. So it's not necessarily like, just imagine if and I don't know, it would be interesting to look up this statistic, but like, so in 1924, how far did the average person walk and what load did they carry?
Yeah, compared to now.
I bet I mean, think about just getting groceries home or something like that, right? I mean,
Right.
like you have so many different things that there's so many different things that used to provide not working out. Like that's what's interesting is like that's just living your life.
I was thinking that when I was walking yesterday, that that was a normal thing to be able to walk, but you were actually carrying things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at old fences. You see a lot of really old fences out here, which always makes me think back to the physical shape that the pioneers had to had. They're cutting down and making these mesquite. You see a lot of these old mesquite post fences where they've actually been put into the ground. And they didn't have a post hole digger, and they didn't have, there was no.
They dug a hole probably.
Yeah, they somehow threw some rock out here, most likely, and then had to cut the tree down.
You've been
get
reading
it to where it is.
You've been reading Grapes of Wrath, right?
Yes.
Have you gotten to the part where Jim is just walking and he's looking for work and he gets up with that guy and they end up going and digging that ditch, that irrigation ditch?
No, I'm just now where they're getting into. They're about to leave to head to California.
Okay.
They sold all their stuff.
Well, this doesn't ruin anything for you, but it's one of those things that whenever I read that scene, it blew my mind because he literally just like gets up out of bed, throws on his one suit of clothes, and walks out to go look for work. And the work happens to be digging a trench through a field. Right? I'm thinking water, food. I need all of these different things, leather gloves, whatever. He's walking and they say, "Hey, you want to dig this trench?" And he says, "Hell yeah." Takes off his jacket, jumps down in there and starts digging.
Right.
And I'm like, those dudes probably could do that for 8 hours a day at the drop of a hat.
Right.
You say, "Hey, there's money to be made right here." At the drop of a hat, they could dig. Like a 4-foot deep trench and it's just one of those, when you think back on it, it's just kind of an incredible shift that our society's gone through from really where you didn't have to think about like fitness. You just had to think about like living your life, and like the fitness came with living your life. Like they talk about like Comanche women could all pull back an 80-pound bow and shoot off the back of a horse. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about a woman that could do that. And I'm like, they had to have been superheroes. Like, I bet they're because I can pull back an 80-pound bow, but twisting on a horse and stabilizing myself, it was like, and that was like common for like, even kids were pulling, like, it was just their benchmark, their zero.
So going, just to get, because we are.
Way off topic.
It's fine.
Sometimes I think about my podcast where I just kind of go in any direction at any point in time. I always forget that.
And it's fine, but I want to pull that back into, the people that we're trying to reach and what we're trying to get. I want people to be motivated, understand that it's not going to be easy when we're talking about these things, but the mobility is very important. And doing a sit-up, stand-down squats, all these things that I thought were so silly when I first did it, I had no idea how trashed my body had gotten from the stroke and how important those things are, And I think the sedentary, that when you went over that, the sedentary lifestyle, most people are living that before they have a traumatic experience. And that doesn't have to be just stroke. It could be any major surgery or car accident that, there's just so many things, but we're already sedentary. Mm-hmm. So then we're just falling into a worse trap of health issues. And, in the case of stroke, some TBI stuff, but a lot of these things that happen to your body has to do with being in a position of vulnerability where you're not in that great of shape. And then you get knocked down. Well, then it's really hard to sit up.
Oh, yeah.
Just getting up and out of bed. So if you feel like, for anybody watching this that hasn't had a trauma or hasn't had that serious medical emergency yet, if you're having a problem getting out of bed or you have a problem bending over to tie your shoes, just know that if you do have an emergency, a medical emergency in the future, and that's probably going to lead you to having one, which you mentioned, mobility is a huge thing. You're kind of setting yourself up for failure right off the bat. And but I'm not trying to be negative about the whole thing. I'm just saying that I think it's important for people to stay in shape, which I think is, and to push when they are in therapy to get in the best shape.
Well, and also don't shy away from discomfort, because right. You gave me that Stronger After Stroke book to read. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I thought was interesting that they said was that occupational therapy is built around getting you to put your shirt on, not necessarily getting you to use your left arm to put your shirt on. Right? So, for instance,
according to insurance.
Right.
That's all the insurance.
Oh, yeah. No, agreed. I'm sure that the therapists want to get every aspect of it.
Okay.
They want it. Yeah, no. I'm just saying that was kind of what he was saying in that book.
Right.
Was he was just saying that, like, based off of, the insurance is it's just getting your shirt on or whatever, right? But I also think it's interesting that, like, they might have a tool for you, right? Like, there might be like, hey, this is your tool to put your shoes on so that you don't have to bend over to put your shoes on.
Right.
And it's like, to me, I'm kind of like, I get it. And I want that person to have as much freedom within their life as possible. But at the same time, don't use that as a crutch. Use that as something that is taking you forward, right? Like my buddy Coben, he had these this fork designed for him that he can basically slip his fingers into, because he couldn't necessarily hold a fork,
right?
But he can scoop this, and now he can eat on his own, right? And so I'm not saying, oh no, he shouldn't. Definitely, I mean, do that thing, but at the same time, he's like pushing his body as far forward as he can, like, to where he's not using it as a limiting factor, right? And I think it's so. As you can probably, I know I've heard you say before, but like, for instance, if you were going to do the laundry, or I know I've heard you say it when you were unloading the dishwasher, mm-hmm. you would bend down to grab a plate, and when you stood up, you were dizzy, mm-hmm. right? That is uncomfortable and not fun and does not feel good. So if you just said, hey, I'm not ever bending over again to grab that dish,
right?
Because it is uncomfortable. But instead, if you say, no, I want to be able to bend over. I'm not saying do anything stupid. I'm not saying push yourself in an unsafe direction or nothing like that. But even, like, for instance, if somebody has a gate, maybe you get out and you put your coat in, and then you get back in your truck, right? Like, you build in all of these different little challenges throughout the day, to where you don't have to get it done, but you're challenging yourself. And so at the end of every single day, I pushed myself as far as I could push myself.
Which is what therapy is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in general, just because I'm not in a therapy environment, and I'm not going to an actual facility.
Dude, I wish I had a therapist.
Day to day, yeah. But
I would love to have somebody that, like, evaluates my body and then says, hey, you're really lazy in this, and this, right. And we're going to get, I would love that.
It was hard whenever I got away from that and didn't have that tool right there handy for me, But I still continue day to day right now. Every day there's therapy.
You're pushing it hard, man.
Walking down these steps is therapy. There's just a lot of things that I use. But to go back to the kind of the basis of this particular podcast, we're talking about blood pressure. I think we've gone over some things to let people know kind of what caused. We can't really nail down. Okay, what's high blood pressure? What's low blood pressure? Everything's going to be different for each person. Same as their journey to get better, maybe different than it looked like for me to another person. But in general, a healthy lifestyle is going to lead to a healthier blood pressure. The other thing we hadn't really touched on that I would like to touch on before we wrap up is diet. We did just very shortly talk about it, but I think that's important as well, to talk about the difference in what has become in a busy society really easy just to go grab something real quick that's already prepared for you, made, and eat that on the road and go, but it's not good for you. There's a lot of things that are probably breaking down, and the reason why there's so many sick people in the United States specifically, but in the world, but specifically here for sure, we were putting a lot of bad stuff in our bodies.
Oh, dude. I mean, that's the whole push that Robert Kennedy was making with the Make America Healthy Again and all that stuff. I mean, dude, the amount of times that I go on a call for a lift assist to pick somebody up off the floor that can't get up off the floor when there are multiple other people in the house. So we're like, not only can the person that fell on the floor not get up out of the floor, but other people can't help them up out of the floor.
Oh, well.
Right? You've got layers of disability, and most of it is just based off of diet. It's and now granted, I can't say what, that's just my personal opinion, what I'm thinking. It's like, if you look at somebody from the 70s who was smoking cigarettes and drinking beer, like, have you ever seen that picture where it shows like a beach in the 70s and then a beach in like 2018? Okay. And it's like in the 70s, like everybody's like thin and, not ripped or shredded or nothing, but you don't see a fat person you look out the entire beach, you don't see a single fat person. And then it shows the today's, and everybody's covered up in sun shirts with umbrellas and big hats and big glasses, and everybody's fat, and it's just kind of, it's obviously a systemic lifestyle. Like, it's the result of systemic lifestyle choices, and that's the reason it affects everybody so blanketly. And I don't think, to me, it's like, how many steps does something have to go through before it goes into my mouth? And every single step, they're adding in different chemicals. And so it's kind of one of those things when you look at the body as a big vat of chemicals, a big bag of chemicals walking around. It's interesting that we are not more cognizant as to the chemicals that we are putting in. And not even saying like chemicals as in like synthetic, but even natural chemicals, right? Like carrots, tomatoes are a form of nightshade. Mm-hmm. You can use nightshades to make poisons to kill people.
Right. I was reading on that.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those things that and tomatoes, how they looked 200 years ago compared to how they look today. Right. I mean, all of our food has been processed through these different, I guess, processes, to become what it is today. And that, like they took like a corn for like the Native Americans was like pretty small, not super big kernels, but very nutrient dense. Now we have these huge ears of corn that have these beautiful big kernels, but they're not necessarily more nutrient dense just because they're bigger, So now granted, I'm a dummy and I don't know none of this stuff really. I mean, I'm not anybody that should be advising anybody on any of this stuff, but I do see a lot of people go on diets. I do think that like exclusionary diets are very interesting to me because it makes perfect sense, right? Take out all of this stuff that could be making you have a food allergy or could be affecting your system or could be affecting your blood pressure or affecting all these different things. I'm going to limit my food. I'm only going to eat these 3 known things. As soon as I get all my symptoms under control, I'll introduce this thing and see, does my skin get all jacked up or does my gut go crazy or whatever? And then as you introduce things, you start to realize what you're allergic to or what you're not allergic to. Right. I don't think I'm allergic to anything. Like, I've done multiple different diets. I've done multiple different things. Like, I've never really changed. Like, I don't feel like my body's ever responded differently. There are other people who the second they switch to a new diet, their body instantly flips, right? Their skin clears up or they stop having gut issues or whatever. So there's definitely something to it. Not saying that every single person's going to have the same prescription.
Well, I don't think at this point in time, day and age, however you want to say it, that we're at, that you have to be a doctor to be able to know that you having a lot of salt in your diet's not good for you. MSGs are not a good thing. And if you just think about how dried up salt will make you, I mean, I know you have to have, there is a certain amount of salt your body has to have, but pretty much anything that's processed meats and burgers from McDonald's or the meat that you get, lunch meats. I mean, those things are packed full of sodium.
Oh, well, and dude, if
and other product, no telling what all's in there.
I know, I like to like think of it with like a plant, you know, like you get a plant, its stomach is the ground, right? And so it's pulling these nutrients in, and then it, you know, grows up out of the ground, and it's this cycle of, you know, bringing those nutrients up or whatever. If you think about it that way, like some of that food does not decompose.
Right.
Right? Like most food, like if I throw a core of an apple into a compost pile, it will be gone. You won't see it at all. But you know, like if you've seen the thing where they set the McDonald's sandwich on the table and it's there 3 years later and it doesn't look any different, it hasn't decomposed at all. You know, like a lot of that is like how quickly does something break up and become bioavailable, you know?
Well, what does that do to your body? I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at. When you got something that is meant to last longer, that doesn't equate to make your body last longer. It means to me, the way I look at it, not a doctor, but the way I look at it is it's staying in your body. Somewhere there are leftover residual things that are just constantly getting added into you and making this system that I think God created very uniquely and it runs a certain way is messing up that system. Mm-hmm. You know? I think when you fine tune it and you're feeding it the things it needs to be, and I do not want to be a hypocrite here and say that I don't like to, you know, some junk food every once in a while, but in moderation.
Oh, and I mean, that's where I would definitely caution, which granted, hopefully nobody is thinking this at this point, but I would caution, like, I drink a lot of beer, you know, I eat cookies. I've been pretty blessed. Like, I don't ever indulge in sweets necessarily, but if I see a cookie and I want to eat it, I eat that cookie, you know?
Right.
So I'm not necessarily like a good authority on any like sort of diet or anything like that. I think it's more the way I have always viewed it is just like general guidelines. Mm-hmm. And you know, like for instance, when we drove to go Angel Fire to go skiing, we ate McDonald's.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, there's going to be times.
And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, sometimes you eat McDonald's. I mean, it's not like any of us are making it out of this project alive. Right. Every single person is going to die. Your body is going to break down. Your body is going to go through this process, and you are going to die. There's nothing. Well, that's for a different podcast.
Yeah, I was about to say, we'll save that for that. Go there.
Yeah, there's maybe some stuff, but overall, like your body is trending in a certain direction, and there needs to be preparation for that. There's prehab, right? So I think
we're looking for quality of life.
Yes,
that's what we're looking for.
Well, and that's what
throughout this whole process.
What I'd say is there's
going that way.
There's like a prehab for your body and a prehab for your spirit. You know, there's a prehab for how you eat and the way that you're eating and how but something still is going to go wrong.
Right.
You know, you still just, that way you can face that challenge when you get there, mm-hmm. and maybe have some good habits on the backside. Like I do think like your habit before you had your stroke was, I get up every morning, I work out, I go to work, I work really hard all day. Mm-hmm. I'm going and going and going.
High stress level.
That was kind of your baseline. So now that you're in rehab, that's your same expectation. It's like, hey, I'm expecting to push it. I'm going to get better. I'm going to do more. I'm going to push myself. I'm going to continually improve. And if you tell me that the goal is getting to the end of the hallway, I'm going to get to the end of the hallway. There's some people that don't get to start with that mentality.
Right.
You know,
It is a work ethic thing.
yeah,
I would
you
believe.
had the work ethic stepping into it. So it's just kind of interesting. I don't know. I'm just kind of musing a little bit at the moment because I do think that there's multiple different aspects, right? Like your body going into it was in better shape than if you hadn't been doing anything.
My hope is that we're going to, you know, inspire other people, people that may not have that same drive that I do, but to see that it is possible. I could have easily just laid down and never really gotten any better, and depended on people to take care of me for the rest of my life. You know, the brain rewires itself, neuroplasty. That is a legit thing. I'm a very big proponent of that after seeing it, what it does. But I had to choose to get out of there, and I want everyone to understand that they can make a choice. I realize everybody's journey is going to be different. I got a good friend, Patty. She's hopefully going to come on the deal. I was blessed to be able to see her actually walk on a walker when she graduated day neuro up there, but she's probably going to spend a lot of time in a wheelchair, and she knows that, which is, I'm sure, frustrating in its own way. I love her very much, and I hate that, but she's a very powerful person when it comes to how much she has improved, because she could have laid down as well at that point, even though that's why I'm saying that her recovery journey is different than mine. I mean, yes, I'm able to walk and go do what I'm able to do. She can't do that, but at the same time, she has improved and was able to get back a lot of stuff that she would have lost otherwise.
That's one of the things that I was really touched with. You know, once you really progressed into that phase of the rehab phase, one of the things that I was really touched about was that the physical therapists put expectations on you beyond what you think you can put. And it's kind of it was just like, okay, those people believe that you can do more than you're currently
physical,
doing.
Occupational, and the speech therapist.
Yeah.
All of them were pushing that limit.
And I think that that's key. Mm-hmm. Like if you hadn't had somebody with those expectations working with you, right? Like if their expectation wasn't, no, you're going to speak normally.
Right.
Like you're going to speak however you want to speak. That's our goal right now. You're going to walk however you want to walk. That's our goal. Now, do you obtain that 100%? Maybe, maybe not. But if the goal is set, you're going to get a lot closer to it than if somebody was just saying, okay, Mr. Pearson, our goal is to get you to be able to walk and get water out of the fridge and then walk back to your bed and lay down.
And 20 years ago, that really, even that would have been pushing the limits 20 years ago if you start looking back at the history of that therapy for brain injury, for any of these stroke type situations or spinal cord injuries, any of that. 20 years ago, it was like, well, we're going to get it where you can use the restroom on your own, hopefully. Like that would be a huge thing. And learn how to transfer from your chair to the toilet and feed yourself and probably dress yourself, like you're saying, with whatever. I mean, even 20 years ago, that was a big deal for them to even go that far. There was a point where basically you were just left to your whatever recovery you had in that first acute phase. That was it. It wasn't an acute and a subacute and then a chronic phase of recovery, which I'm in chronic now. The therapists now believe that there is still ability for me to keep gaining right now. But even 10 years ago, like where I'm at now is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life. You know, that was just the accepted norm, you know.
There's have you ever seen that YouTube video with the neurosurgeon who had the stroke?
No.
But or maybe she was a neuroscientist. You need to watch that video, but it was crazy because she's doing this thing, or she's like doing a TED Talk presenting her story, and like 10 years ago or whatever, maybe it wasn't even that long, but it was a while earlier, she had a stroke, and as she was having the stroke, she was identifying what she was like experiencing. So she was like, oh, ooh, okay, I'm having a stroke. look, okay, yep, the ground is this, okay, and oh, it's hitting this portion of my brain. I know it's hitting this part of my brain because I'm losing vision over,
Wow, that's
like,
got to be wild.
yeah. So she lived, and then even into the recovery process and stuff, she understood all of these things that she was then being. She had guided
She
all
probably
of these.
pioneered some of the
Oh
newer
yeah,
stuff, it
dude.
sounds like.
Well,
I mean,
and
that's
then
huge.
yeah, she. I mean, I think I can't remember her overall point was basically saying she was stressing plasticity, saying that the brain can rewire itself, it will rewire itself, but you also have to give it the inputs. It's a object in motion stays in motion, but an object at rest stays at rest.
Absolutely.
And so I think that, to me, that was what it seemed like the overall point was basically saying, like hey, you can have these problems, and she did have some deficits still, but I mean, she was still a neuroscientist, and so it's kind of one of those directions you gotta. I think having that expectation that, and I think this goes for somebody that's in recovery, whether it's from depression, drug addiction, traumatic life
There are a lot of
injury.
different traumas.
There's
I mean, you're going
so
over
bunch
right
of
now.
different traumas, and I think as long as the overall mentality is that you can get better,
Yeah.
like that's always an option, is that it can get better. I mean, it can also get worse. It will also get worse, but it can also get better. You know.
You know what I love about having you as a guest is
What?
I knew we wouldn't stay on topic.
Oh,
but
yeah.
This has been a great conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Sorry
think
about that, everybody.
No, I think it's good because we're hitting on a lot of things that are very near and dear to my heart, and things that I think people need to hear. And I pretty much expected that to happen.
Yeah, I
you
didn't know.
but I had to have somewhere to start. You know, hey, we're
Yeah.
going to talk about blood pressure. I don't think we did go over that, and we've gone way past that in a good way.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it was fun. I'm just excited that I finally got the podcast on the new stands, dude.
Yeah.
I'm digging it.
So Dexter's been a big help with me through my recovery process. This is also part of my recovery process. Doing these podcasts and talking, using my voice, and getting comfortable back with the deficits that I'm left with. Dexter's been a big push for me to be more honest and not hide some of the things that I have been hiding. I'm going to try to do that as it goes with shorts here and there. You know, let y'all see when the bad times are there, when I do overdo it, and some of those side effects from that.
Yeah, it's not really fair. It's not really fair if you only show. I mean, that's one of the big dangers of social media, I feel like, is that people only show the good stuff.
Yeah.
And then people start to think like, wow, everybody else's life is so great and mine is so terrible. But it's like, no, I'm not going to show you any of the terrible stuff.
Right.
You know, you're only
and
gonna
I don't think that's right. That's not the point of this anyways. I want people to see what I'm dealing with, that they can get better, you know, if they really want to. And that may, and like I said,
I'm excited. I'm excited for you to share a lot of those videos that you took, because I remember talking to Amber really early on. I don't even know if you had gone to the second spot yet. And she said, yeah, we're talking with the therapist, and a lot of the therapists say that they think that they're going to be able to get him to where if you meet him, you would have never even known he had a stroke. And it's kind of like one of those things where, I don't know, it's just, it is interesting, because when you do have something like that, and then you can just like hide everything, and then it's like nobody would know that, like, you couldn't see, and you couldn't walk, and you couldn't swallow, and you couldn't do all of the, like, how genuinely bad it was.
Right.
Because then they're going to just be saying like, oh yeah, Trent's fine. He's not walking
Sure.
around.
Well, even now, you know, being able to see some of that old stuff would probably explain, you know, like I need to do a close-up and show what my eye actually does. I still have vision problems out of the left side of my eye. It still moves. It still makes me nauseous. Fatigue is such a real deal. But yeah, it's easy to cover it up and put icing on the cake and say, oh yeah, 100% healed. And yeah, that nothing touches me. You know, I think Jamie Foxx is a pretty good example of that. and he's had an amazing, tremendous, his story's awesome too. And if his special was really cool, but I was able, and I told and showed Amber, I said, but if you watch, this is a production. So there's certain things, but if you watch, you can see a hitch in his step. If you watch close enough, you can see the draw when he's talking from the old Jamie Foxx. But he's had a great recovery, but he acts like nothing can touch him. And he did, in all fairness, he got emotional, and that was what I wanted to see the most. That's probably what's changed the most about me is it is hard to hold back certain emotions like what I used to be able to hide before. And media is a pretty easy way to do it and to say, well, you know what? I'm going to hit stop on that for a minute while I sit here and boo-hoo about something or, whatever it may be. Because there's certain smells, certain sounds, certain things that will always trigger that time of not being able to see and not being able to walk. And there are some great videos that we're going to be showing of me from the beginning to where I'm at now, and even some of me trying to play guitar, which was so frustrating for me. But I feel very blessed. I've been working on that too, and I'm pretty excited to show that as a comparison from me barely being able to touch the strings to actually being able to play a song again, which, I'm not there yet, but I'm practicing daily, which goes back to that same thing. Same thing with your blood pressure, same thing with health, diet, exercise, is that you have to want it and you have to put in the time.
And you have to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think that's what's really hard is the second, I've seen it a bunch on like fire trainings and doing stuff at the fire station when we have to do stuff. Attitude is everything. I've had captains before where they're like, hey, I need you to get out there and do this thing. And you're kind of like, oh, I'm not going to do that. Telling me I'm like I'm a kid or whatever. I got to go like listen to my boss. Like, kind of sucks. But then I've had other captains where they're like, all right,
let's go do this.
Like last one, we'll do this. We'll play this game, whatever. Whoever loses buys slushies or whatever, and you end up, before you know it, everybody's having fun. You get the job done, completely done. And then at the end of it, you feel like you actually had fun. You didn't just do work, So I do think the attitude, if I know you were really psyched on getting to go to therapy. Mm-hmm. Like you were looking forward to it every single day, getting in there, and you knew it was going to suck and you knew it was going to hurt. But that was actually part of what was making you want to get in there. You knew you were getting better, and they created, I know I've just heard you talk about how great of an environment they had created in there,
So I don't want to do that now. Obviously, the hope is that this podcast reaches very far, is far spread, and there's a lot of people, but I want to build a community. I know I'm not the only one that's trying to build a community right now. There's a lot of really good groups, concussion, TBI, and stroke, and there's just tons. But I want to actually try to facilitate, and I know a lot of the people that I went to therapy with want to do the same thing and try to build a community where there is this open ability to talk to somebody when you're not feeling like doing that day, that says, hey, you got this, let's roll. And maybe have somebody in your community or somebody close to them that has been through that you can reach out to and say, hey, can you go walk with this person, today, or go help them do something, or take them to lunch, whatever. That's part of a longer term goal of this podcast, but it is to hopefully build a supportive community, because once you get out of the therapy, that's gone, and I've had a supportive family, supportive friends, that's been huge for me, but not everybody has that. Some people are getting released from therapy and they're going home on their own and sitting and looking at four walls, and they can't move very well. And those people need help too.
Oh yeah.
And it's the insurance game, but we can keep going on. There's so many podcasts, but we're going to talk about the insurance thing eventually too. And people get kicked to the curb, and there's therapists that say, hey, wait, what? I could help them. Oh, no, the money's not there. That person, you got them to where we're going to send them. That was the other thing. Blue Cross Blue Shield did not hold me back on the amount of therapy that I could have. So having a good group of therapists that were able to document that properly and keep me going and showing progress was everything. But I watched other people in there that were making great progress that got kicked to the curb, and it's not because those therapists didn't have their 100% of their heart into it. The insurance company just, somebody sitting behind a desk said, no, we're done. You're done.
Yeah.
You're done.
Sad. It's sad.
Anyhow, I think that's a good place to wrap it for today. I really appreciate you coming in. I'm looking forward to you being on again.
Oh yeah, no, man, I'm always available to talk for hours.
And I will put a link to Dexter's podcast. We don't always see eye to eye, but that's part of what makes his podcast fun and interesting, is a different take on day-to-day living.
Almost nobody sees eye to eye with me. Like, is what I've been realizing recently, is I'm like, how does every single person disagree with me, you know?
You're like, does that mean I'm wrong?
It's like,
right?
It's like, I know I'm right. I mean, I know that I
very much enjoy our time together.
That's funny.
I guess please like and subscribe. I know a lot of people have actually looked and watched the podcast, and I'm very appreciative of that. It would help me even more if you can subscribe. That just gets it out to more people. Just part of the algorithm. Keep things rolling.
Keep it rolling.
All right. Thank you. Have a blessed day, and we'll catch you on the next podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
Peace out.